sponsorship of this event. Obviously, I think from the turnout and some of the response that we've already had, I think it's pretty important. I think we'll cover a lot of great topics over the next hour or so. Certainly appreciate our panelists' time. They're all extremely busy. They can take 2 hours out of their day. We certainly appreciate it, so thank you again. I'm just going to run down some upcoming chamber events first, and then we'll get into it. On April 10th, we're going to have a business before hours at the Brigham House, more of a networking event. We've done it in the past at the Days Hotel and other venues, but the Brigham House is actually a very nice venue. Feel free to come by. Taste of the Towns event on Thursday, April 26th. We have a cultural networking event on May 3rd, the New Rep Theater, Little House of Horrors, with a reception before at the Arsenal Center, so we're looking forward to that. We have, backed by popular demand, a tour of Mount Auburn Cemetery, which I've been to, and it's actually a terrific event, and hopefully we'll get the same crowd we've had in the past. We have our golf tournament at Belmont Country Club on June 11th, and a boat cruise on June 21st. So just remember to watch the website, call the chamber if you have questions, if you want to attend. We're obviously happy to have everybody. The more people, the better the event. So in lieu of a tight timeline and 6 panelists, we're going to get this State of the Towns underway. Again, I just want to thank everybody for being here. We've changed the format a little bit this year for a couple of reasons. One being that the town of Belmont is still in flux with a town administrator. So I thought it might be a good opportunity to change the venue, get the folks in the audience a little bit more involved. We'll have each of the panelists come up just for a few minutes, talk on some high points, and then we'll open it up to questions and answers. As these folks are speaking, we'll certainly think about some questions for them. They'll be happy to answer them. First, because he is a seasoned veteran, and because Mr. Jones and Mr. Baghdadi are fairly new at this, we're going to allow the town manager of Watertown, Michael Driscoll, to come up and talk for a few minutes.
Thank you, Robert. It's a pleasure to be here. When Bob talked about change of the venue of the forum for this State of the Towns, I really want to thank each and every one of you for giving up the rest of your afternoon to hear us speak. Normally, my speech last year was about 45 minutes. I would probably take 43 minutes, and then you have 5 other folks coming. But all kidding aside, I really appreciate the opportunity to come here with representing Watertown today. It'll be myself, and then a few minutes later we'll have Steve Magoon, our Community Development Planning Director, who we've been very, very fortunate to have with us as the town's Community Development Planning Director since September of 2008. And then thereafter, I know we've got Representative Heck and Senator Brownsberger and the folks from Belmont as well. So I want to kind of very quickly talk about some of the accomplishments since last time we talked, but really more about what some of the upcoming goals are doing. And again, trying to do it as quickly as possible. I did want to, with respect to the finances in Watertown, we submitted the budget last April. The increase was 2.33%. So just by way of background, for fiscal years 10, 11, and 12, the Watertown budget went up 3.44% over those 3 fiscal years. So that's an increase of 1.147%, which obviously is very low. And the 2 questions you have is, why is the budget going up so low, 3.44 over 3 fiscal years? Why is it going up so low, and why is there not a significant reduction in services or clamoring for an operating override? Very quickly, I think some of the reasons why the budget hasn't gone up very much has been Local aid since fiscal year 2009 has dropped by $2.9 million. We're very anxious to hear from state legislators as to what will happen for fiscal year 13. Another issue, as you all know, in the economy, driven revenues have been really, we've lost money, 10% on our motor vehicle excise. And our investment income back in fiscal year 2008, we brought in with the monies we had for deposit, we brought in almost $750,000. In fiscal year 11, we brought in $74,000. So in essence, those are all reduced. Those are on the downside, less local aid, less money's coming in economy-driven revenues. So what's the plus side? And again, it continues to be a decision that the town council very much supported back July 1, 2009. We were one of 11 Massachusetts communities to join the Group Insurance Commission. To me, it was a critical decision. The decision allows the town to continue providing quality health insurance to its employees and its retirees. We also are taking full advantage of the Commonwealth's track of cost containment, as evidenced by a press release that Governor Patrick put out on March 2nd, that the lowest increase in a decade for health insurance was 1.43%. Last year was 2.42%. So in essence, Watertown in fiscal year 13 will be spending less money on health insurance than he did in fiscal year 2009. When you hear mayors of other communities, the Somerville mayor has talked to me about a 25% increase. So that's a significant issue. Very quickly, in real estate taxes, we're still very much the envy of many cities and towns around us. Our average tax bill for fiscal year 2011 was $4,500. That compares very favorably with Newton at almost $8,600 and the town of Belmont at almost $9,700. So in essence, we're doing that. Streets and sidewalks, the town continues to work very diligently, providing money in the tax dollars each year for streets and sidewalks. The council, over the last 14 fiscal years, has provided almost $8 million of tax dollars for our streets and sidewalks. We're almost done with Pleasant Street. Let's keep on working there. Two projects that we're going to be working on in calendar year 2012 is Waverly Avenue. It'll be a cost of $2.6 million, and Carroll Street. Another item that we're very interested with is moving forward in August. The council was very much behind, was moving forward with single stream recycling and automated collection. That'll start in August. The goals of that project is to address the continual goal of cost savings, reduction of trash collection, and increased recycling. We have the abilities, you won't have to separate your newspapers or your bottles and cans. The last part of the presentation is just briefly talking about Town Council's budget policy guidelines. I want to hit on 5 of them. One of them, what the council did last year, they wanted to look at the public safety departments. We're ongoing with a public safety study that'll be issued later this month, and that's an opportunity to determine how police, fire, and dispatch is together represents the town's biggest expenditure, exclusive of education, and examine how we can best deliver the level of services to the citizens more effectively and efficiently. And 4 other items real quickly. The town council wanted to move forward with creating a comprehensive plan for the town dealing with a broad spectrum of issues, including development, zoning, and transportation. We've got an RFP out on that now. We'll be looking to fund that in the next couple of months. We're also going to be working with an energy services company to try to reduce the town's energy by 20% in 5 years. We have been certified as a green community, and we're looking to continue to pursue energy-related grants. Another key budget policy guidelines that council's looking at is to examine the staffing structure of the Public Works Department. We're going to be looking to do a similar review as we're doing with the police and fire and moving forward. And the last one is not very jazzy, but it's also working with council, and to council's credit, is to look at our pension liability and other post-employment benefits. That's going to be a long-term goal, but it's one that folks we can't not keep in the forefront. Our funding schedule is very aggressive. It's to be paid off in full in 2022, but all the while we've got an unfunded pension liability and other post-employment benefits. liability that we need to deal with, and that's something that, to the council's credit, they continue to raise that as something we need to look at. So in closing, I look forward to working with the Honorable Town Council, members of this community, to provide the highest level of services to the citizens while utilizing the taxpayers' dollars as efficiently as possible. 3 weeks from tonight, I'll be submitting the fiscal year 2013 budget, which would be the 20th I've submitted. I started this job when I was like 6 or 7 years old. But in closing, again, it's a pleasure to be here, and I know I am introducing Steve already. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. I'd rather do a formal introduction. We'll bring up Steve Lagoon, the Director of Community Development and Planning in Watertown. And I think maybe if we talk into the microphone, Steve, I think Diane was saying that it's a little tough to hear back there. So.
Is it on? I don't know if the microphone's on.
I think it is.
Do it over again?
Hello? Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Appreciate the opportunity. When the manager found out he was going to share the podium, he only gave me 3 pages of items to cover for him. So hopefully, bear with me. It won't be too long. Now, my primary topic to talk about was some of the development activity taking place in town and some of the things that have been going on, which I'm sure many of you have seen and recognize. I did want to touch base on 2 townwide studies that are important to the town. One that was recently adopted back in 2011, the Economic Development Study, which really has a pretty significant impact on a lot of the things that the Chamber and businesses in town are interested in terms of establishing a vision for our economic development and the ways that we would go about attracting business to town. And the second one, the manager just mentioned, the comprehensive plan. This will be a real opportunity for us to establish a common vision for the community. One that I think would likely have impacts on pretty much everyone in this room in one way or another. And so in that light, I would certainly encourage all of you to become involved and participate when we begin the process of public interaction and public outreach and start discussing the real content of that plan and what the makeup of it will be. Just give a brief summary of some of the ongoing projects in town, some of the more significant ones. I think one of the reasons it's important to really talk about that, and the reason that these things are a positive for the town, is some of the economic numbers that the manager mentioned are positive because we do have new growth and we do have development. The one way to increase our revenues and the resources we have as a municipality, without it being through Proposition 2.5 override or without it being on the backs of existing property owners, is through new growth and development. Those things add on top of that revenue source that we get from property taxes. So a couple of them that I'll mention and certainly be available to answer questions about any particular ones in further detail later in the program. But Arsenal Residences is a project right in Watertown Square, a 5-story building with 14 condo units as well as some retail space on the ground floor. I know a lot of people have been wondering when it was going to actually begin getting occupied, and I'm glad that now they finally started marketing individual units and are actually looking to occupy those. There's also some retail space on the ground floor of that building as well. The Harts Mason project, 270 Pleasant Street, obviously a project that has removed a significant vacant, dilapidated industrial structure or structures that have been there for quite some time. It's a project with 170 residential units and 1,161 square feet of retail space. That does include both sides of Pleasant Street. Some of you may have noticed they started work on the Howard Street side of Pleasant Street. That will be where the retail space will be, as well as some additional residential units that are part of the 170. That project's also providing a pretty significant, a number of different mitigation opportunities for the town, but one that I do want to mention is they'll construct the portion of the community path which will go from Pleasant Street to Charles River up to Main Street through some town property in that area, town Cambridge property, actually. Next project I was going to mention is 140 Pleasant Street, which is where the garage, everyone knew as Dirty Dan's, used to be located, and obviously that project's going up, a 5-story building with 44 residential units with parking underneath. Well underway. They hope to have, or are very close to completing a model unit in that, so they'll begin showing that, and I think we'll have occupancy by the end of the summer. Riverworks, which is the new name for Boston Scientific, or at the Mills Building, also on Pleasant Street in the west end of town. It was purchased at auction by Farley White Interests, a pretty significant real estate investment firm in the region. They are doing some pretty substantial renovations to that, including a new entrance, which may be seen along Pleasant Street. They have their first tenants moving into the building now, although they're still in the process of renovating significant portions of it. That's I think a really good opportunity for the community in terms of continuing the diversified nature of our real estate portfolio. In that there were a significant amount of interest in that property becoming residential. So the fact that it remained commercial and will continue to have commercial tenants, office tenants, I think is a good thing. Also in the commercial arena, the Central Rock Gym, which is a rock climbing gym, was approved for the corner of Acton and Rosedale intersection. It's replacing an existing 1-story industrial building that wasn't terribly attractive with a 15,500 square foot 2-story building, new building. Another very recent project, 20 Summer Street, which is at the corner of Summer and Spring, just off of Watertown Square, is a assisted living building, a 5-story building with 90 units of assisted living, including an Alzheimer's unit with parking underneath. I think as well as some retail space again along the street front, provide a real significant infusion to that area of Watertown Square. And then the last project I'll mention is Waltham Street Apartments, which is a project across Waltham Street from the Gore Estate. At this point is a project proposed for 155 units of apartments. Would also provide again some significant amenities to the town in terms of improvements to Walker Pond, pedestrian access down Charles River, as well as some physical improvements in terms of stormwater management in the existing neighborhoods and traffic calming. It also have a townhouse-style development along the frontage of Waltham Street, and then larger buildings, 4-story buildings in the back. So that's a summary of the recent projects, and happy to answer questions later. Thank you.
We'll allow Belmont to come up, and we'll introduce the chairperson of the Board of Selectmen in Belmont, Ralph Jones.
Thank you very much. And I also want to thank Mike Driscoll for giving me an idea and an outline of what to say. I think it's notes here. First, I want to say I'm very happy to be here and part of this Chamber of Commerce meeting. I grew up in a retail store family. And so from the age 8 till about age 21, I worked for my father and my uncle. And I have a great sense of the sort of issues that retail people face. And I could try to bring that at least to the things we're doing at the town of Belmont. One of the things we're doing is redoing the traffic circulation and parking in Belmont Center. And one of the key things we're trying to do is to make sure that both town employee and commercial employees park in an area that is farthest away from the stores. My father used to have a rule that all employees had to park at least 4 blocks away from the store so that customers could park more closely. We're going to try to do that. In terms of the town of Belmont, the first question that came up when I walked in was, what's happening with the town administrator search? And I can give you an update on that. We had 70 applicants apply to the Collins Center, who's running our search. Of those, we looked at, I'm on a search committee, and we looked at 40, and we reduced the number to 10. And we have some highly qualified people. We're going to begin interviewing them in April and should have a recommendation of, say, 3 to 5 people to bring to the Board of Selectmen by early May. And therefore, we hope soon thereafter to have an appointment. But it's a very strong field of candidates who are really very pleased. In terms of our budget, we have not been able to keep our taxes quite as low as Watertown has, but we have stayed under 2.5% for a number of years, and will stay below 2.5% again next year. In fact, taxpayers will be the beneficiaries of a reduction achieved by our town treasurer when he refinanced the debt on large buildings. That refinancing saves about $1 million, about $100,000 a year, and that, by virtue of it being on a debt exclusion, must come directly back to the taxpayers who paid it originally. So that'll be an additional reduction on people's tax rates. We have done this while also maintaining our AAA rating for bonds. As you may know, Moody's downgraded a number of cities and towns last summer, and we were one of the few that was able to retain our AAA rating this year. For our health insurance, we had not joined GIC, but we did take advantage of the state program that allowed us to negotiate with our employees and basically achieve a GIC-like structure. In other words, all the features that the GIC had in terms of plan design were open to us in our negotiations. The only constraint was there needed to be a mitigation fund to make sure that the employees were not adversely affected during the first year or two of that program. And we were able, with the cooperation of our employee organizations, to reach an agreement that will save us $354,000 in year 1 and $470,000 in year 2 and 3, which will mean that the health insurance costs for the town will actually go down by 3.8%, and the health insurance costs for our employees will go down by 3.8%, which is a good deal for everybody. In terms of restructuring and regionalization, I know our Town Administrator Driscoll mentioned this. We are going to put that on the shelf for the time being until the new town administrator has arrived. We'd like him or her to have a voice in how we restructure town government. But it's clearly something that's on the top of our minds. And we have, as an initial move at least, combined the maintenance programs for both buildings and grounds, for schools and the rest of the government, and put it into one department that is being created in the new budget. And finally, the town administrator mentioned an important problem, and that's OPEB, post-employment liabilities, retiree health care. The selectmen are adopting a policy this year that will require that a certain percentage of free cash every year be devoted to an OPEB fund, so that we have a realistic policy to begin to fund that as a means of retaining our bond rating. It's an issue that Moody's is now looking at, and we need to restructure something that will help us do that. And now I'd like to have Chairman of the Planning Board, Sandy Baghdadi, give us some idea of what the new developments are in town. He knows that much better than I do.
Hello, it's an honor and a pleasure to be here this afternoon. I've been on the Belmont Planning Board for about 6 years now, and I've been its chair for 2 years, so I'm just going to share some observations. Belmont does not have a problem with development as long as it's residential. We are a very strong residential town. In fact, 95% of our tax revenues come from residential and only about 5% from commercial. And you all know, with residential comes school children, which is an added cost, and an added cost that gets factored into our development and our net tax revenues. Belmont does not have many large parcels of land to develop, and those parcels that have become available, Belmont has tried to encourage commercial, office, R&D development. You know, for example, the Uplands, which is the parcel off Route 2 in Fresh Pond. Belmont, I believe in 2006, negotiated with the developer, okay, who also did a development in Watertown, to put 245,000 square feet of office and R&D. We drafted a bylaw, an amendment to our zoning that would authorize that kind of development. Well, now it's a 299 unit 40B development. Again, the skew towards residential, because residential is so strong in Belmont. We've also tried to do that at McLean Hill, you know, the single remaining largest parcel of land in Belmont. And again, by negotiation, this was before my time, in 1999, I believe, McLean Hill was divided into different sub-districts. One was residential sub-district that authorized up to 122 residential units, townhouses. Those are booming. Those are selling well over $1 million a piece. Okay, developer has come back and said, I need more land, okay, to keep going. Another area was zoned for, again, research and development. From memory, I believe about 100,000 square feet, 150,000 square feet of R&D. Again, still no takers, okay, no development. And then another portion was zoned for more healthcare uses, independent living, assisted living, maybe some nursing home component for the elderly. Again, I'd like to say up to 399 units maybe. Again, just sitting there, no takers. So that is the challenge Belmont faces. What we've tried to do as a planning board is to incentivize development through the use of overlay districts. So our underlying zoning doesn't change, but we will enact zoning that goes on top that says that landowner or developer, if you design your project the way we like it, the planning board, then we'll give you density bonuses. And that is specifically what's going on right now in Cushing Square, the Cushing Village project. That is a project being developed under the overlay. By right, a developer can go up to 2 stories. By special permit, and if certain conditions are met, the planning board can grant a 3rd story and a 4th story. So right now, we have a 179,000 square foot proposal before the planning board. Again, 20% commercial, 80% residential, okay? But it is an exciting, a very exciting project. Any other project that size in Belmont would have to go through town meeting for approval, for a 2/3 approval of town meeting. Okay, our bylaw says any business development, commercial development over 40,000 square feet has to go through town meeting. Town meeting has trusted the planning board through use of this overlay district to redesign Cushing Square, and that is what we are trying to do. So it's a very exciting process. Of course, we've got business owners on one end, residents on the other, you know, abutting and nearby residents, and then the developer in the middle, and the planning board kind of politically trying to come up with the most viable design and work with the developer to come up with a successful project. And then we'll turn our sights to Pleasant Street. You know, Pleasant Street is a nice strip of land. It's about 11 acres that, again, is ripe for redevelopment. It's kind of an isolated area. So that is a brief summary. I know we are way beyond time, but this is a brief summary of what's going on in Belmont. Thank you.
Thank you, Sammy. You was gonna pass too, and look at all the information. All right, so we're gonna turn it to more of a state level. I'll introduce a good friend of the chamber, a representative from Watertown, Jonathan Hecht.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm very happy to be here. I appreciate the chamber including Senator Brownsberger and myself in the event today. I was excited in Bob's introduction to hear about that new play that the new rep is going to be doing about the legislature. Little House of Horrors. Seriously, the first thing I want to say is I just want to recognize, I mean, these two towns, Watertown and Belmont, are both extremely well managed communities. We're very lucky, those of us who live and work in these two towns, to have administrators and leaders like Mike Driscoll and Ralph Jones and the other gentlemen who've spoken. We really have wonderful communities, and I thank them for all of their hard work. Both Senator Brownsberger and I were local elected officials before we went to the legislature, so I think we both have a real appreciation of the challenges that local government officials face. And since we've moved to the legislature, I think I can speak for Senator Brownsberger when I say that we are doing what we can and make it one of our highest priorities to support these local officials who are the ones really on the ground making such a difference in people's everyday lives and in the environment that we create for families and for businesses. The things that really affect people's quality of life in the most fundamental ways. The most direct way in which we try to support their work, of course, is through the budget, and particularly through local aid. Mr. Manager Mike Driscoll he's looking for some tea leaves to help us prepare for the budget that he's going to be presenting, and I'm sure that the local officials in Belmont are feeling the same way. I wish I had some specifics to share. The House, which takes up the state budget first, will be getting a budget from its Ways and Means Committee in about a week. Next Wednesday, the House Ways and Means budget will come out. And it's another challenging year. We're still, unfortunately, in a mode of essentially hoping that we can it just sort of hold serve. Tax revenues at the state level have rebounded somewhat in the last couple of years. The projections for the coming fiscal year are that tax revenues will be up about 5%. But, of course, costs continue to mount, particularly healthcare costs, but other costs that we know from experience are inevitable: energy costs, pension costs, etc., eat up those new tax revenues very quickly. So the bottom line is that, again, this year at the state level, we're looking at the need to find some places where we can save some money. We're not going to be in a position to invest a lot of additional money. On local aid in particular, the governor, when he submitted his budget in January, he is projecting essentially level funding for the key local aid accounts, for local education funding, for general government funding. It's certainly my goal to do at least that well, to at least hold steady. I've been talking with the Ways and Means Committee and with my colleagues about whether there are some ways that we can make some small increases in local aid. Whether we'll be able to achieve that in the end, we'll just have to wait and see. It's again not an easy thing in the current environment. One piece of local aid that is now clear is our aid for local road work. Last week, the House adopted a bond authorization for what's called Chapter 90, which is the mechanism that we use to provide money to cities and towns so that they can do maintenance and improvement of local roads. And in that area, we were able to achieve a level funding. The manager will know the exact number down to the penny, but I think it was approximately $744,063 for Watertown, and 11 cents. And I think Belmont also saw a level funding or a very slight increase. And as I say, that's essentially the environment that we're operating in these days. There are other very important local organizations, non-governmental organizations, that the state also helps to support through other mechanisms, not through local government directly, but for example through the funding that we provide for elder services. Funding goes from the Secretary of the Health and Human Services Secretariat down to Springwell, which is the organization that provides elder services for Watertown and for Belmont. That's an area of great importance to me. I'm the vice chair of the Committee on Elder Affairs, and we're working very hard there too to provide a level of funding that will allow Springwell and other organizations like Springwell around the state to provide at least a level, a steady level of support for our seniors. Likewise, early education programs. We provide funding through the Department of Early Education and Care within the Secretariat of Education for programs like the Watertown Family Network, for Creative Start. These are all programs that are so important, again, for the quality of life in our communities, and they bring really vital services. And we are working as best as we can under difficult financial circumstances to make sure that they're able to carry out their missions as well. One other thing I'll mention, well, maybe I'll allow, Will, you want to speak about the tea? Because you do it. I'll move on to other things. This is an issue that we've both been very concerned about. The MBTA, everyone knows, is under a lot of pressure. I'll let Will carry forward on that one. Let me, I really value the interaction that I have with the Chamber and its members. We've been having, regular sit-downs so that I can hear from you about what's of concern to you as business people, ways in which the state can be of assistance to you. That's something that I very much want to continue. I've been having ongoing conversations with Brenda and Bob Arasian about healthcare costs in particular, and seeing if there's some ways that we can be of help through some group purchasing mechanisms and other things that the state has been trying to put in place to help local businesses with their healthcare costs. I look forward to carrying on those sorts of conversations with you in the future as a chamber, and continue working with our local officials and seeing how we can continue to be of help to them as they work under, again, difficult circumstances to do the work that they do. I heard the manager referring to the study that he's doing on public safety services, and I heard Mr. Jones speak about the interest in Belmont on regionalization. Will and I have been involved in conversations with our local fire departments around the possibility of doing some regionalization of emergency medical services. I think this is an area where we need to be investing more energy to find ways in which Watertown and Belmont can improve the level of services for their citizens, again, in a way that comports with the sort of the resources we're going to have now and in the future. So that's another area where I hope we can continue to make some effort. So let me turn it over to Will, and look forward to taking any questions you may have.
Should have known that putting a timeline on this, especially these gentlemen here, was not a good idea. But at any rate, we're a little bit over time, but that's fine. We're going to introduce newly elected Senator William Brownsberger, who's also been a very good friend to the Chamber.
Thank you very much, Bob, and thank you all for being here. So I'm Will Brownsberger, and the seat I occupy is the seat that Steve Tolman occupied for many years, and Warren Tolman before him. So with redistricting, that extends from Belmont through Watertown, through Brighton, a little strip of Alston down to all of Back Bay and Fenway. So that's the district. Being serving at the state level and in the state legislature does give one a window into what's happening in other communities across the state. And I will echo Representative Heck's comments that these communities are extremely well managed. The stories you hear from other colleagues give you a nice base of comparison, and the elected officials in these communities, the appointed officials in these communities are truly outstanding on a statewide scale. And I don't say that lightly. And I will also say another thing I don't say lightly, that my colleague John Heck, I can tell you, is one of the finest, most dedicated, intelligent, thoughtful, committed representatives, members of the legislature that you will find. And I've felt that from the beginning of the years that I've had the privilege to serve with him. I want to share with you a little bit of a big picture. At the state level, our revenue sources are different from the revenue sources of local government. The primary revenue source of local government is the property tax. And as I've often heard from my constituents, it goes up and up and up. That's a beautiful thing if you're running the government. And what that means is that local government has a relatively stable revenue base. At the state level, when the economy catches a cold, the state gets the flu. And when this economy catches the flu, the state is on its deathbed. Because we have very elastic revenue sources. We're dependent on things like the corporate profit tax, like the capital gains tax, which plunge when you see when the economy goes down. And even the income tax is very dependent on the economy, and of course the sales tax as well, due to a slightly lesser extent. So over the past few years, the state agencies have taken some really deep cuts. The governor's made it a priority, and the legislature has supported him in preserving local aid. But state agencies like the environmental agencies and the court system have taken actual significant headcount reductions to make those numbers work. And so a lot of these agencies are really under a lot of stress today. Now, we are, of course, coming back a little bit, but there's a consensus that we're kind of on a new normal. In other words, we had a growth path of revenue, we took a deep hit, and we're going to go back up on a growth path, but we're never going to get back to where we were. We're never going to get back to that original growth path. And so that at the state level, things are expected to remain tight for a long time. In fact, the emerging numbers basically say that if we have a continuing healthy economic recovery, and if we get our healthcare costs under control as a state, then we can probably maintain the current collection of services and local aid that we have now. So at that reduced level, our ability to maintain at that reduced level is dependent on continued growth and success in controlling healthcare costs. Healthcare costs are a big part of the local budget, but they're a much bigger part of the state budget. When you roll together Mass Health, which, by the way, serves 1 in 5 citizens of the state of Massachusetts. 1 in 5 citizens in the state of Massachusetts is on Mass Health. That's about a third of the state budget. You roll in a couple other things, it comes up to 40, 45, close to 50% of the state budget. So that's a huge, rapidly growing thing that we really have to struggle to get under control. Nothing is more important than that in the coming few months of the legislature's activity to see if we can make a dent in that. I also believe that we also need to make a continued effort to more deeply reform our pension system and our other post-employment benefits, meaning retiree health care. It's the low man job. I am the chair of the Public Service Committee as state senator. I'm the Senate co-chair of the Public Service Committee as state senator, and so that is a job that I'm the most junior state senator right now, right? Of all 40 or 39 or 38 of us, however many there are at the moment, and it's the low man job because nobody wants this job because it's actually a difficult job to hold because you're constantly presented with special cases, special pleading. There's a certain situation in some town, some place, and this is wrong, and can you fix it for us? And usually the answer just has to be no. But I'm hoping to keep that job next year and not give it to the next most junior senator who comes in, because I do think we have an opportunity to make some important reform. Representative Hecht is the only person who is willing to co-sponsor with me the bulk pension reform approach that I think we need to take in the coming year. And so I'm hopeful we'll make some progress there. That's what we're up against. So in that big picture, I just want to touch on the issue of the transit system, which Representative Hecht alluded to. We face a huge gap in our transit system. There is the immediate budget problem that the T went through, and I think the T really got a strong message from people: don't cut our services, find a way to patch that gap without cutting services. And they substantially avoided cutting services, and the recommendation that they're about to make to, or that the staff has made to the T board, which the T board is likely to approve. And it does depend on the legislature allowing the expenditure of basically repurposing a 51 million some amount of dollars to support transit. But we'll do that, I'm sure, and they'll be able to maintain this year. But it's a longer term problem, and it's a problem that affects not only the T system and the level of maintenance in the T, which translates into the level of reliability in the T, but also the level of maintenance of our roads and what that translates into the reliability of our major roads and the Big Dig itself. And all of that really reflects the fact that we spent $15 billion on the Big Dig, and we're still paying for that in a whole host of different ways. In the late 90s, they just parked debt all over every single place they could find to manage some of that cost. When the federal government said, look, no more, we're not paying anymore, you're going to pay for the rest. They were stuck. They had the only way they could go was forward, and they just parked debt on our future. Big portion of our federal highway aid is still committed is still pledged to the payment of bonds to pay for the Big Dig, and there's debt on the T, and there's debt on there's general obligation debt of the Commonwealth, there's debt, there was turnpike debt. So it's all over the place, and that's really the drag on the system that has backed up so much maintenance through across the state. So that's probably not a problem we can solve without some new revenue sources, and that's a difficult conversation we'll have to have. But I'm hoping that over the next couple of years, we in the legislature will be able to do some of the reforms in the pension area, the healthcare area, that will leave voters comfortable that we're doing what we can and we really are controlling costs, so that as we come to them with a statement that we do need more revenues for things like highway maintenance and the transit system more broadly, that they'll be willing to support that. So I thank you for having me very much, and it's a privilege to be with you. I look forward to the questions.
Okay. We got time for a handful of questions, and we'll keep the responses to a few minutes so we can get to at least a few people. So if anyone wants to, if you gentlemen want to come on up, or yeah. Any questions in the audience? Mr. Tarbejian, how are you?
Good, thank you. Good program. In Watertown, for instance, when a property comes up for reuse, say the Coolidge School or the East Junior High School, both of which have been rehabbed and reused, what is the primary consideration, basically? Is it to rehab the property and preserve it, or is it to get a nice rental stream out of it? Or in the event of a non-profit, is it to get some taxes out of it? And then also, with all the projects coming on stream in Watertown, I was wondering what the projected tax revenue is for all those projects, and if there's some nice prudent plans what to do with the increased revenues.
I think in terms of the first question, reuse of town properties, I think it depends a little bit on the particular property and what the needs of the town are at that point. For example, the branch libraries, which became surplus, first thing we did was look at, are there town uses, town needs for the use of that property. At this point, there really weren't any. So the next, we looked at what opportunities are there. So I think the primary issue with those buildings is getting those renovated and brought up to code. So we were looking for a tenant that would be a community use. We could maintain ownership of the property to get them brought up to code. And we're still working on that with the East Branch Library. No takers yet in terms of the North Branch Library. So, and I think an example of the Coolidge School, that was, one where we found appropriate use that could bring revenue back to the town and reuse the building for residential purpose, and so that obviously worked out pretty well. In terms of the revenue streams from those particular projects, I don't have a total number for all those projects together, but we do look at that individually as projects come forward and look at the financial impacts of projects. And for example, the Waltham Street project projected when you took both the revenues that they would bring in as well as the costs that they would demand from the town in terms of services, it still was a net benefit to the town. I don't remember the exact number. I'm not as good at manager at that in terms of retaining numbers, but somewhere in the $150,000 to $200,000 range on an annual basis.
Is there any plans for the increased revenue or to do with it, or?
Yeah, I just on the second part to Mr. Tarvasian's, I would respectfully say it's twofold. One of the issues that we talked from fiscal year 09, 10, and 11, with the budget going up only like 1.1%, we talked about the Group Insurance Commission being a very positive factor. The other one was policy guidance that council adopted, that there be no base wage increases for town employees for fiscal year 10 and 11, which would be consistent with what happened to the federal workers, Social Security recipients. So that was in fiscal year 11 and, I'm sorry, fiscal year 10 and 11. Well, fiscal year 12 and 13, we are providing modest wage increase for the employees. So that's one issue with what Mr. Magoon alluded to, some of the new developments occurring on Pleasant Street. The money's coming in for that will help, if you will, provide that. I think the other issue, working with council, and both Representative Heck and Senator Brownsberger and Mr. Jones brought in, is the pension liability and other post-employee benefits. I think the representatives for Watertown and Belmont would be well served to have dialogue about how do we have a plan, and we have some new revenues that have not been earmarked yet, of dedicating some of those monies to addressing that problem.
Do we have a rainy day fund?
We have a rainy day fund, yes. Yeah, I would respectfully suggest that council has an unreserved fund balance policy of anywhere from 7 to 10%. Watertown's is close to 8%. So and I think that's prudent management, and that you're not spending every dollar twice that you have.
Other questions? Why don't you sit out here? Here you go, Mike. Just speak loudly.
To keep costs down, what are the two towns doing together in functions, and are you looking at new types of things together to reduce your costs?
Good question.
I think that one of the areas that has the greatest potential is in uniformed services, particularly fire. Our fire chief has been very strong in advocating regional fire service. As far as he's concerned, if you had a regional, say, a Boston Metro West Fire Department, you could keep the manning and reduce the number of fire trucks and other apparatus substantially. So you'd have big savings on capital costs, and you'd be able to fully staff the vehicles that do go out. With our manning right now in Belmont, some of our trucks that go out actually act basically as taxis to bring people out to the fire ground. Take a ladder truck and send it out. It just brings 2 more firefighters to the fire ground. If you could have a fully staffed engine, you wouldn't need to do that. So there are some potential savings between the two towns. We have, I think, 3 ladder trucks at this point, and it might be possible for us to reduce that to 2 if we were able to agree upon how they'd be serving the town. So I think there's a lot of interest there, and I was pleased to hear the manager discuss that as a potential area for savings.
Yeah, to Michael's question, I would agree with Mr. Jones. We're currently, Belmont and Watertown are sharing a plumbing, gas, and fitting inspector, so that's an employee that services both communities. We used to do the same thing with the animal control officer, but we both employ Watertown animal control officer and Belmont animal control officer. Representative Heck and at the time Representative Brownsberger had convened a meeting with public safety officials, both fire chiefs from Watertown and Belmont, looking at the potential in the future of having discussion about the delivery of advanced life support to both communities of Watertown and Belmont. I mean, that's worthy of further dialogue, but I think the ongoing ones we have right now, I mean, that's in addition to the standard mutual aid that both Belmont and Watertown provide to each other and other communities. But I think Belmont is eager to have that dialogue, and we're always willing to have dialogue. Council had adopted policy guidance. One of them was to always look at regionalization opportunities in multiple of areas. There's one area that we may have some further dialogue on is the delivery of veteran services, where we have right now in the middle of a recruitment for a veteran services agent. There is the legislature had passed the opportunity to have a veteran services district, which would allow for the employment of one individual to cover both communities and have a part-time. So there are opportunities, I think, very much speaking for town council and working with this administration, want to work with our neighbors in Belmont to see how we can even further increase the efficiency to the services of both communities.
Any other questions? Yes, Chief.
It's more of a comment, but I'd like to thank the state elected officials, Senator Brownsburg and Representative Heck, for what they do, and I'm sure I speak for Chief McLaughlin and Belmont, the same thing. There's a few things that are going on that they're very supportive to public safety and law enforcement. One of them is the habitual offender law that's going through the State House now. As all you know, Jack McGuire, a police officer from Woodland, was shot and killed the day after Christmas in 2010. That really could have been prevented if that gentleman, Sinelli, wasn't allowed, a life offender, to be out. And I think there's a lot of debate at the State House now how they can put a bill together, and I know they're at the front edge of that. Senator Brownsburg is also helping us craft. There's a quirk in the law right now where we can't control our boundaries as well. We can't go into Belmont and have our jurisdiction and our authority. It's a flaw in the law. So if you can imagine, right along Belmont Street now, there's probably 40 intersections from Waltham to Cambridge that Belmont and Watertown really can't enforce. That doesn't mean you should go through stop signs and red lights. A lot of things that these gentlemen do that you don't hear about all the time. Representative Heck just got us funding to continue our jail diversion program that gives us a clinician at the police station that's in our cruises on a regular basis to help families that are in need. So they do a great job a lot of times. They don't. A lot of times, elected officials are criticized, but they've been a big help to us at the Watertown Police Department. I just want to point that out.
That's great, Chief.
More comments like that?
Jonathan.
Question on the Watertown side. You've done this terrific economic development plan. You're to be tremendously commended for that. I'm wondering what your approach is for new development proposals that conflict with or don't match up with that plan.
I'm going to let Steve answer that.
Is that a thinly veiled question about Walmart, perhaps? Well, I think having a long-range planning document like the economic development study gives us a basis to evaluate projects in light of that. And to the extent that they're not consistent and we have discretion to approve or not approve projects, I think that provides us a lot of guidance and a lot of support in terms of how we evaluate those projects. And I agree with you that I think it's a good document. It goes a long ways to help us with that. Even more so, a comprehensive plan will do that, not only in terms of economic development, but in relationship to a lot of other issues like traffic and environmental protection issues, a whole wide range of issues, and give us similar guidance in terms of how we evaluate projects in light of those things, and should be a real tremendous tool for us.
Anything else? Questions? Go ahead.
I sort of have a follow-up question on the Walmart thing. We talk about sort of regional programs, and I think that Walmart is not just a program for Watertown, but in some ways also regional. So I think Belmont should be as much alert about having a Walmart going where it's supposed to go, because it would add as much traffic to the streets in Belmont. And I don't think Belmont could take much more traffic, for example, going through the center of Belmont, and it will increase. It's just a common feeling.
Are you gonna, on Pleasant Street, you're gonna lobby for one of the casinos now?
Lemonade.
Could do, right? Yeah, exactly. Plenty of room. Right. Anybody else? Any questions? Everybody ready to go back to work? One thing I wanted to mention, Tufts Health Plan. I think I missed your recognizing Tufts, but they've been a great friend, and because I missed you, now everyone's going to remember you. So, but we certainly appreciate everyone coming. I want to thank all the panelists here for a job well done and their time. So we can just give a round of applause to them. And hopefully we can have more of these types of discussions in the future. Certainly we're open to any ideas and follow-up questions from this event. We'd be happy to talk to you. So we appreciate it. Thank you, Brenda. Thank you, the girls in the office. Thanks to the Oakley and the elected officials that showed up and our board members. So we appreciate it. Thank you.